Hey everybody, it's P.A. Turner from the Break It Down show, bringing you today's guest, Zach Johnston, who writes for, among other places, Uproxx. He has his own podcast, following our theme of podcasters for the week, and his show is called One More Road for the Beer. Zach started traveling as a young man and just simply never stopped. He's worked in kitchens and bars all over the world, to include Berlin, Moscow, a variety of places. He's traveled to stands, and when push and shove come together, and it's do you go see the pyramids or do you go find that haunt, he would rather go find that haunt, strike up a conversation with the local, and truly get into what that place is about through the eyes of the locals, their food, and their spirits. I love this guy. You're going to love him too. He also did us a favor. He boosted up Where Travelers podcast, which I produce and my lifelong friend Teresa Rodriguez hosts. And so we appreciate him for that. And we'll be hopefully doing some more things with the folks at Uproxx. I'm telling you, you guys, I haven't met Zach face to face, but I can't wait to do it. And I can't wait to grab a drink with him because he's just that kind of a guy. And I'm just over the world. I'm just over the moon about him. Okay, a couple little business things. One, as always, the more you share the show, the more you participate with the show, the better it does. It gets to more people and they can discover it. I know you guys are already doing that. Just if you can, continue to do what you're doing. And if you can do a little more, great. Most importantly, even more important than the show, is Save the Brave. Scott, John, and I all contribute money and our time towards the charity because we believe in it. This is what we do, and we would love for you to join us. Just simply go to savethebrave.org, click on the donate button, click on the subscribe button, and then type in the number 25 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 50 or 100. Whatever that number is that you don't mind giving each month, it's going to make a big difference in how we're able to help veterans want to stay alive and actually manage to do it. In terms of doing it, let's do exactly that. Let's get into this show. Let's hear from Zach. I know you're going to love him because I love the heck out of him. Here he comes from Uproxx.com, Zach Johnston.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hi, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Zachary Johnston. I'm a travel, food, and drink writer for Uproxx Life, and I'm here on the Break It Down show today.
Yeah, this is cool. I always seem to say that automatically, but it is. It's so fucking cool, man. I love that we get to do these things. You and I almost were connected when you were in Southern California recently, but we talk a lot about performance and the arts and everything, but travel is such a big part of my life. I just got back from Dallas, and, you know, I don't want to, when I go somewhere, I don't want to experience the big corporate experience. I want to experience the true, and I say Dallas, really I was never even in Dallas other than the airport.
Right.
I want to go to those small places. Like we went to a Mexican restaurant called Cookies that you're never going to find a review on, and it's a locals only kind of place that really captures who and what the folks in this case McKinney, Texas are. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you like the more like reliable, you know, I don't want to say Applebee's because that's unfair to those guys, but what's your sweet spot for all those kind of things?
And I have a lot of sweet spots. I have learned over the years of traveling that my sweet spot depends on where I am. And so, you know, if I'm in central London, I'm going to have a sweet spot of, I'm going to try some high-end restaurant I can't get anywhere else and sort of check that off a bucket list. If I'm in Waco, Texas, I'm going to get out of the car and just walk around Main Street, and whichever, you know, hamburger joint is overflowing, I'm going to go to that one because that's where everybody is. And so a lot of things for me is kind of getting out of your car, getting, you know, on your feet, walking amongst the people of where you are, you know, turning off the phone for a few minutes. You know, you don't need a Yelp review. You don't need, you know, an eater review, and just observing what's around you. Like my rule has always been, you know, whether it's a food stall in Singapore or street food in Kabul or, you know, a restaurant in Manhattan, if it's full and bustling of people having a good time, that's all the review I need.
Do you have basic food rules? Like, I'll eat anything but? Is it texture? Is it flavor? Talk about that.
I've got a really wide, varied palate. I do have a travel food rule. If I'm in a place with a lot of street food, if I don't see that dish come off the fire, cooked in front of me, I'm not eating it. Because I've had a few dishes, you'll see them in chafing dishes, and it's 95 degrees in the Thai sun, and it's like, yeah, I've been sick once or two too many times from doing that. So now my rule became early. I got to see it come off the fire if it's street food. Otherwise, I eat everything. My rule was always try it twice, because the first time somebody might have fucked it up.
Hey, this is P.J. Turner from the Break It Down Show, checking in real quick to ask you this. John, Scott, and I all support Save the Brave with our time, our location, our effort, and our money. Each month, we give a small amount. Do the same with us. Go to SaveTheBrave.org, click on the Donate tab, pick an amount that you want to come out each month, and they will handle all the rest. I stand behind these folks. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the show.
My rule was always try it twice, because the first time somebody might have fucked it up.
Yeah. And there's sometimes when you're just not ready for the flavors that come in, and you can be improperly soured on an experience because,
sure,
like poi. The first time I tried poi, I thought I was about to taste something similar to refried beans, and it did not. It tasted like dirt, and I hated it. And I don't think I've ever tried poi since. I would absolutely go back and try poi again, but it was just it surprised my mouth too much,
Right. And that's what's interesting. There's actually some really cool indigenous Hawaiians right now, like bringing poi back, but bringing it back in ways where how it was made traditionally, so non-processed in a factory, where they're bringing in other, roots that are bringing different flavors into it and things like that. And then it's usually depending on what it's served with. It's sort of, are you having it with some nice pork belly, or is it on its own? But that's why I say, always try it twice, because you never know.
Yeah. So we're talking with Zach Johnston, who's a writer for Uproxx, among other things. You can get him on the website. If you just go to uproxx.com and you type in Zach, he's going to come up. But also Twitter, ZTP Johnston, Zulu on Instagram, same thing, ZTP_Johnston. If you type in ZTP on either one, he's going to pop up. And if somehow you manage to not find him, you can always hit me up, and I'll make sure you guys get linked together. I was looking at your bio, and obviously you've been traveling since you were young. And I too, like my parents, like for whatever things good and bad they did, one of the things that goes in their favor is they got me traveling early, and I sort of developed my travel calluses. Like I have a hard rule that like when I'm traveling, I'm never in a rush. So I leave a little bit earlier than I have to, because I just don't want the stress of I waited to the last possible minute to leave, and then any variable makes it even crazier. So I tend to leave, earlier, and I just kind of leisurely get there. I never run at the airport. If it's my fault, maybe. But if they switch terminals, not my problem. I'm not going to dawdle, but I ain't running, man.
Yeah.
If the airplane is delayed for weather or for mechanical things, I am the happiest guy in the world. I will just go kick it in the bar and have a drink. And please don't rush, the airline. Like I don't want to die because you guys are rushing. Take your time. It's all going to work out,
And when you fly a lot, shit happens all the time, and you just got to roll with the punches, because like you said, I want that plane to stay in the air and land safely. So if you got to put a door back on, you put that door back on.
Yeah.
It's also, it comes down to, for someone who travels a lot, like you see immediately the people who are there for like the first time, or they travel once a year, and you kind of get almost like a spidey sense to steer clear of, the people who only get to fly once a year, because it's sort of like, you don't want to be in their way. You don't want them in your way. And, I fly enough. I just usually head to a lounge anyway. And set up shop, because I usually have to work or something like that, because I have to work on the road. So I set up shop with my laptop, have a couple free cocktails, and then mosey on over to the plane when it's time for the plane to leave.
Yeah. You don't care about boarding early at all then, I'm assuming.
No, I would prefer to be the last person on the plane. So I minimize my time on the plane, because for me, I'm traveling somewhere long distance about once a month.
Right.
And so I take anywhere from 4 to 6 flights a month, some of them overseas. And so, when that starts to add up over the year, you take that, times 12, suddenly you're at 72 flights a year. If I'm spending an extra 10 minutes on each one of those flights, that's an extra 720 minutes of my life I don't have back.
Yeah.
For the course of a year. Now, sometimes I'm spending an extra half an hour on the plane, or an extra hour on the plane, and then it's, we're talking thousands upon thousands of minutes of my life wasted sitting on a plane not moving.
Yeah. Plus, I dread the like the wait on the tarmac, And so if I got on the plane half an hour early because I had to be the first one in line or whatever, and then you get to wait for however long it takes. Oh man, it's just absolute murder to me. I can't tolerate it. I just, I try to go to sleep as soon as I can. And like you, I'm happy to be the last guy. Last call. That's my section. Last call.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the sort of thing, I do feel it is getting a bit better as airports are updated, especially across the United States, to the point where it seems to be flowing a little better than it was in, say, the 90s, where I remember a time where every time you landed at O'Hare or JFK, you were sitting on that runway for 90 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And, that seems to have been alleviated more so now, where it's only extreme weather circumstances or something that's going to cause that. But, I mean, it's also... it's just finding your flow as well and finding what you want to do. I don't mind showing up at the airport early if I have to and sitting around, like you said, having a drink. But that doesn't mean I want to sit on the plane early.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and plus, like, I don't like to wait in line, which is exactly what happens when you get on first. It's like, it doesn't, I don't know. Anyhow, I don't fault anybody for liking that, but I'd rather, like you, I always have work. I can always edit. I can always do marketing. I can always do pre-production stuff and get a hold of people. So if I can sit somewhere and work into that last possible, and I'm right there. I'm not holding anybody up. No one's waiting an instant on me. I just, I'd rather walk right up to the front of the door, on the airplane as opposed to halfway down a jetway.
Yeah, for sure. And that's just everybody's going to have their own rituals at the airport. For me, like a big thing with, what I feel like we get through at travel in Uproxx is find your pace, find your comfortability, and lean into that. Don't let anybody sort of tell you like, well, this is what I do, so this is what you should do. It's like some people don't like sitting in lounges. Some people don't like sitting at bars. Some people, don't like being in the airport at all. And it's like, fine, then, just figure out a way for you to do this your way and go with that.
I admit I am a seat leaner backer. I don't mind it.
Right.
I pay for the space that I get. I have a button. I push it, and it makes me more comfortable. That little bit is it's a relief on how my posture. The thing I offer in return is I don't get up once I'm on the airplane. I mean, I rarely move from my spot. I don't bug anybody. I'm a window seat guy, and so yes, I'm going to back into your space. But look, that's just how it is.
Yeah, I have my sort of unwritten rule for that is I only recline if it's an overnight flight. And so, because that to me, how can you not recline if you're going to be sleeping for 9 hours on a plane? But for like shorter, 2, 3, 4 hour flights around the country, I'll generally stay seated up. But yeah, it's sort of, I don't know. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4".
Right.
And so like, I tend to try to be at least in premium economy just so I can have space.
Yeah.
So up there, I don't feel like it's as big a deal if you recline either, because there's so much more space that, the person behind you isn't getting that crowded. Whereas if you're in row 55 and you're in seat K and somebody, in row 54K goes back on, you're going to feel it.
Yeah. And even in that, there seems to be a little more leg room. They're just like maybe they've nudged it up, or I think they've made the seats thinner so that there just seems to be, but not on all airlines, not on all airplanes, but that's, so enough about airline stuff. That stuff's pretty boring. One of the things, so I produced Teresa Rodriguez's podcast for Where Traveler. You guys should check that out. Zach actually reviewed it recently in his article. Thank you very much for doing that. One of the things that I love about what she does is, because she's like you, just a seasoned pro, out and out pro. Here's what I bring, here's what I leave behind, that kind of thing. What are some of your things you're like, no matter what I do, where I go, I always have these items with me? What are your gotta haves?
I'm pretty minimalist. I travel with it's a small size North Face duffel. No connection there, just that's what I carry.
Yeah.
They don't pay me to say that. And so I can either check it or carry it on if I need to carry it on. I usually leave it about half full when I pack, so I can bring stuff back with me if I need to bring stuff back with me. Essentials, I mean, I very much have a uniform where I wear jeans and a shirt. pretty much every day, usually a black shirt, same 1-2 pair of jeans, pair of Vans, pair of running shoes. I usually bring my running gear with me wherever I go. So shorts, shirt, some tape, things like that. Because I do like to keep my running up while I'm on the road during the week, especially. And then that's basically it. Because I'll bring like one dress shirt in case I need to do something fancy, or if I know I'm going somewhere where I'll need like a jacket, I'll bring a jacket.
Right.
But otherwise, I try to look at where I'm going, look at what the weather's going to be, and then I adjust my usual jeans and black t-shirt to that.
Yeah, but there is something to like that uniform. I tend to travel, it depends on where I'm going, either flip-flops or shoes that are easy to get off and on if the airport is in the shoe off kind of mode.
That's the Vans, baby.
Yeah, right,
Slip on, slip
exactly.
off.
And then always a sweatshirt, usually around my waist, because that sweatshirt is a blanket, it's a pillow, it's just a comfort item. And so I always have that ready to go. Because like if I'm on a long flight as a window guy, I usually have some kind of a hat, like a hoodie, like a skull cap. Right. And so I'll wad that up in a ball, put that into my hood, put my hood on, lean on the bulkhead, and I'm done for hours. I won't move. I'll just be asleep.
Yeah, I feel that.
It's a good system. So let me get into another part of travel too. So yes, airplane travel is wonderfully convenient, but my favorite way to travel is on a train.
Oh yeah, right on.
For me, it's like so especially like you get your podcast is fantastic. Let me plug that real quick because you guys do some great things. It's called One More Road for the Beer, and it's sort of like this beer life experience thing that you guys do, and I love it. And you were talking recently about Berlin with Joe, and I love that part of Germany where if I'm going to go somewhere, I may skip the hotel cost and pop for a berth so I have the time and the sleeping all done simultaneously. But before I get on that train at the Hauptbahnhof I'll go grab 5, 6, 7 beers, in a variety of what's local and just have myself a little party, or probably find some other people having themselves a little party and just make that whole evening a wonderfully fun thing. One of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, and that's a reality on those trains. I've taken quite a few, not as many overnights. Yeah, there's always somebody up for a chat and a beer on those trains overnight. And what's sort of interesting about the trains in Europe is that they already have a high-speed intercity train system in place between most of the Western European capitals. So you can get on a train in Paris and you can be in Brussels in like 90 minutes, 2 hours tops.
Yeah,
and you are in like 2 completely different cities, and it's going to cost you, $50.
Yeah.
And, you can start drinking beers all along the way if you want, or you can, you can splurge for first class and it'll cost you $100 and you get breakfast. So, for me, train travel, like when Joe Stang, who was my co-host on One More Road for the Beer, he's the co-author, The Good Beer Guide to Belgium, that is put out by Camera, the cask ale organization in England. So if you want a great beer guide for Belgium, Good Beer Guide for Belgium by Joe Stang and Tim Webb. But anyway, when we were talking about the show, it was that sort of idea. We were living in Europe. He was living in Europe at the time. And he's a beer writer, and he was exploring the beer scenes across Europe while he was living there. And, I've been in Europe since 2003, basically. And so it was something like we really felt like we had authority in. And so the whole first season, we decided just to do Europe. Because okay, you could theoretically come over here. Like, let's say you're, you just graduated from college, you're 22 years old, you're going to take the next 3 months of the summer, and you're just going to travel around Europe. You're going to go by train, you're going to go between these cities, and you need somebody where you can just be on that train ride, and we'll give you a 30-minute guide before you arrive in Budapest, before you arrive in Amsterdam, before you arrive in Brussels, of all the places you need to go and drink beer that's going to be unique to that place. It's like, yes, you can get all the big macro beers when you're in Paris, or you can go to, you can go to Mikkeller when you're in Rome, or Brewdog when you're in Berlin. But it's like, well, why don't you go to Brewdog when you're in Scotland and go to Mikkeller when you're in Copenhagen and see what's here that is something you won't be able to get anywhere. So a prime example in Berlin, there's this thing called the Spätkauf, Späti for short. They're basically corner shops or little bodegas, usually run by people of Middle Eastern descent. And they sell beer, chips, a little bit of food maybe, and pop, soda pop, stuff like that. Convenience store. And they have a whole section that's just cold beer out of the cooler, and it's between €1 and €2 per bottle. And so for €1.50, which is $1.75, $1.80, you can get an ice cold half-liter bottle of Augustina or Pilsner Urquell or what have you. And you can drink it right there on the street. And it's what the term of endearment for it is. It's a Weg beer, W-E-G beer, which is a beer you have on the go. And so in some cases then in Berlin, like there are certain times a day after work where if you're on the U-Bahn, on the subway train, if you don't have a beer in your hand, you look out of place. Because it's that sort of thing. You just grab a quick beer, you maybe have a chat with a friend, you commute home for 20, 30 minutes, and then you go about your day. And so that specific culture to Berlin is something you can't even get in other parts of Germany. Yes, vague beers exist in other parts of Germany, but not to the extent they do in Berlin. It's not something you see in Munich, for instance, or Frankfurt that much, because it's different beer cultures in all these different parts of Germany. That's why we have a different episode about Bamberg, because that's wholly different than beer culture in Berlin. So when we were devising the episode, it was like, okay, what is unique? And that's what I love about Europe is, okay, well, we know this is unique, but you can also jump on a train. It's 3 hours and 45 minutes by train between Berlin and Munich now because it's a express train. In 3 hours, you can be in a completely different city.
Boy, and when you say completely different, you are not joking. Berlin is totally, and both of them are just fantastic places to go.
Oh, yeah.
Just
God, yeah.
Wonderful. What do you love about Munich?
I was actually just there this summer visiting a friend, had a nice holiday. 3 things stand out for me about Munich. One is the city is so well organized, clean, and friendly. It's almost unbelievable. It's like you always hear those things and you're like, yeah, it's still a city with people in it. But it's just one of those places where it lives up to the hype on that level.
Right.
2 is the beer culture of the city is something that's, well, beer and food culture, but I'd say beer culture probably a little more, given that the beer gardens there are some of the biggest in the world. It is a unique place to go and drink beer in a beer garden, especially in the summer, and then in the Kellers in the winter, because yes, there are places similar to that in Bamberg and Stuttgart and et cetera, but it's the feel of it is so unique to that place. And of course, there's Oktoberfest in September, which is happening starting this weekend, which is a whole other thing outside of the Kellers and outside of the beer gardens. So, and then the third thing that I love about Munich by far is its proximity to nature. I mean, you jump in a car, jump on a bus, jump on a train, and you're in the postcard perfect picturesque Alps, where you have these huge farmhouses with the flowers hanging over the edges, just like a postcard, just like we all do. And it's all really there, and it's like an hour and a half away at most. And so you can go to these alpine lakes and swim all day, and you can, take hikes up to the top of a mountain where there's a beer garden and cows mingling around, and it's all right there at your doorstep if you're in Munich.
Yeah, I love Munich for the same basic reason. And I would say that from my experience, and I know you know Berlin like crazy because you've lived there for a long time, but the people in Munich are a kind of warm that suits me better than maybe the more city style. It's just less of a city to me. Maybe that's what I like about it. Also, always fun. When people go to Munich, I'm like, make sure you go watch the surfing in the middle of the city. And they're like, what? And I'm like, just trust me, go watch it. You'll have a great time. And always, I recommend bring a couple of beers because it's just the perfect thing to do.
Oh, yeah. It's a perfect way to spend like hour or two in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Because it's nice and cool and they're so shady along there. And then the further you walk down, that the river sort of splits and there's like a canal on the side, and you can walk down the middle of that canal because it's about ankle deep. And it's the perfect way to cool off and just this beautiful spring water. And you're in the middle of the city, and it's
I'm a big fan of that Australian bar too, by the way. That's one of my favorite must-go-tos whenever I'm in Munich.
Yeah, it's a good drinking city, that's for sure.
So in terms of Western Europe, give me another gem that you've got. I mean, obviously Germany rocks with beer and all that kind of stuff, but where else would you want to go?
This is always the trick question, man, because it's like, do I want to blow up a spot that I love? Or do I want to go with the easy, well-known answer that I also love? I spend far too much time in Italy, mostly because of the proximity. I'm very lucky in the fact that, there's budget airlines like Ryanair and EasyJet And if you go in the off season, you can fly from Berlin to Bologna, Berlin to Rome, or Verona, whatever, for 20, $30 round trip.
Wow.
And, that's an easy weekend to do when you're only spending that much in transport costs and you're there in an hour and a half, sometimes less.
Yeah.
I end up spending an inordinate amount of time in Italy to the point where I'm starting to learn Italian to make it a little easier. But I love Rome, don't get me wrong. I love Naples. I love Palermo and Sicily. But I'm really a big fan of Bologna, which is sort of northeastern, central. It's before you get to the Alps, so it's in the flatlands. It's in Emilia-Romagna, which is the basically heart of the Italian food scene. So it's where Parma ham comes from. It's where Parmigiano Reggiano, Parmesan cheese comes from.
Yeah.
It's where mortadella comes from. And so in Bologna, it's one of these cities where, again, it's kind of hard to believe a person when they're talking about it, but the whole center of the city, all the sidewalks are porticos, and they're all unique porticos. It's got the oldest still running university in the world, so it's a university town.
Right.
It's a foodie town because it's the capital of Emilia-Romagna, and the Fico Center from Italy World is there, which is a huge amusement park for Italian food. So it's got sort of hits all the mark where it's old, beautiful Europe that you picture in your mind. But then it's also a fun university town where college kids are partying pretty much every night. And then the food scene is, I would argue, better than Rome because it's a little more dialed in to the region.
Yeah.
But then you can still get all the other stuff there. It's one of those things as well. It's only 60 minutes by train from Florence. So if you want to pop over to Florence for the day, but you don't want to pay the Florence prices to stay there, you can, I've done this before. I've gotten on the 8 o'clock train in Bologna in the morning, and I'm in Florence at 8:55. Walk around Florence all day, do the Duomo, go see the David, have a big Florentine steak for dinner, get back on the 9 o'clock train to Bologna. I'm back there at 9:55, and then go out and start drinking, drinking Negronis on the street. Because again, Negronis on the street in Bologna in the center, you're $3-4.
Yes.
And they give them to you to go so you can walk between bars with them, with everybody else. It's one of the only places I've ever been where in the very center of the city, the central square, you will go out on little side streets there and you'll see the salumerias where people are eating salami and cheese, and the streets are packed, and it's all locals. 100% locals. You will not hear English, you won't hear French, you don't hear Russian, you don't hear German, you just hear Italian. Whereas you go to Florence, it's the polar opposite of that. I'm not trying to slag off Florence by any stretch.
Right.
But you walk around central Florence and you do not hear Italian. You hear English and Mandarin and Japanese and Russian and Arabic. And they don't even bother trying to speak Italian to you because they know you're a tourist. Bologna, polar opposite.
Yeah.
Like I was testing this out last time I was there, and I walked around all day and I did not hear anyone not speak Italian.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Florence is, I don't want to say touristy, and Rome is so big it gets away with it. Florence is not very big. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Milan because it's just a little more, it's tucked in behind the Alps, and I just, man, I love that place. But I've never been to Bologna, so I'm excited to try that next time I'm in Italy. What about Africa and Asia? What are your spots that you never get back to enough?
I'm a big fan of Tangier.
Okay.
I like Morocco, but I prefer Tangier because it's got that little bit more of an edge to it. It's one of those cities that have been at the crossroads of humanity for so long that when you're there, and you can get some hash and you can smoke a really nice spliff and drink some really good, like strong mint tea overlooking these beautiful cliffs, and you're sitting next to like Roman graves that were, dug 2,000 years ago, and you feel like the sense of the mosques and there's nothing quite like Tangier, because the rest of Morocco is sort of, I feel a lot, well, Casablanca is pretty dope, but like Marrakesh, Rabat, like the sort of, it's more like mainstream Morocco, where Tangier is more like anything goes Morocco.
Yeah.
I'm also, I'm a big fan of sort of Eastern Africa. I don't get there that often anymore. I spent some time in the Congo a few years back. I did some work with Heal Africa, doing some filming and documentary work there. But that's a rough place. I mean, Eastern Congo around Goma, there's a lot of war things there. And I used to be sort of into like war zone correspondence, so I spent some time in Congo and Palestine and Pakistan, Afghanistan, places like that. A real big fan of Central Asia, so the stands, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan a little less. Kazakhstan's a little rougher around the edges, I found. Whereas Kyrgyzstan is this place that, this is a term that's way overused in my profession, but it is kind of magical in the sense that no tourists really to speak of. They're Russian tourists, but a very small amount. The nature is just unreal, like untouched wilderness and mountains and alpine and glacial peaks and rivers and lakes, and just to me it's sort of like what it must have been like walking into the interior of like Canada in 1700, where it's just like wild beauty that is accessible because they have roads, everything's up to standards, like Swiss standards for hiking and safety.
Right.
And then the food, again, is that, we're talking about the Silk Road here, crossroads of humanity. So you have the Persian influence, and you have the South Asian influence, and you have Russian influence, and you have Arabic influence, and it's, beautiful spicy noodle soups, and lamb on skewers covered in turmeric and paprika, and piles of dumplings with beans, and all the vodka you could possibly drink for about $1 a bottle because it's still been Russified, and then you go to a place like Tajikistan, which is kind of trapped in amber of like this weird authoritarian Soviet-style dictatorship, where you're walking down the streets and like the theater the Soviets built in the 30s is still up and running. The opera house is still up and running. Like it's the department stores are still up and running, albeit very empty. And then it's also, the new dictatorship stuff is there as well. And it's this bizarre mix of, am I in 1955 Soviet Russia, or am I in like a sort of bizarre authoritarian state where there's these huge statues? But then, it comes down to the people. I mean, some of the best, I was there for a month, and some of the best times I had was just hanging out in Dushanbe, going to beer gardens, hanging out in parks, drinking vodka with people, eating shashlik, eating plov on the street, and just hanging out. And because people are people, and I sort of like it. It's another sort of place where the tourism is almost zero. It's stunningly beautiful, natural, wilderness, and the people are just chilled out. They're like, "Oh, you actually came here and you're visiting us. That's awesome." Biggest problem with that, though, is like you got to speak Russian if you're going to Tajikistan. Kyrgyzstan, you can get away with English. Kazakhstan, you can get away with English. Uzbekistan, especially on the Silk Road places, English. But Tajikistan, it's like, no. I bumped into one person over 4 weeks that spoke a little bit of English. Which.
So do you speak much Russian then, or no?
Not anymore. I mean, back then when I was traveling, I used to live in Moscow. I've traveled across all of Russia. Understand. So my Russian back then was more active, but I haven't honestly used it in a decade, and it's just not my active memory anymore.
Right.
I can still read it fine. Like I get by read, but my active language skills are very low at the moment.
Yeah. And so Kyrgyzstan, that's interesting. I wasn't ready for you to say that. It's easy to dismiss the stands, and there's also the hidden stands that are, they're not on the map, like Pashtunistan, yes. and not that that's all that permissible all the time, and it can be pretty hazardous to fly around in. But when you do travel,
I can tell you stories, man. I can tell you stories.
let's set one up here. But I mean, that part of the world can be, well, just like, I don't know anything about Uzbekistan, I would never go there kind of thing, right? And you instantly wipe it off the list. But like you said,
hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
I don't know anything about Uzbekistan, I would never go there kind of thing, right? And you instantly wipe it off the list. But like you said, there are parts of all of that part of the world that are very normal and exotic and super interesting. So do you have a hard and fast rule for places that either have the air of non-permissibility, or somewhere like Kabul that you have, look, Kabul's fine until the instant it's not fine, and then it's the most dangerous place on the earth. And then 10 minutes later, totally fine. So how do you reckon with that? And then let's talk about the stands some more.
Yeah, well, I look at it this way. Like, I've been shot at 3 times in my life. All 3 of those times happened in the United States. In Washington, D.C., Chicago, you know, and like I wasn't shot at purposefully. It was just like I was near people who were shooting at each other.
Right.
You know, one time right on Canal Street in New Orleans on like during the Halloween parade.
Oh boy.
You know, I have been in country in northwest Pakistan with the Taliban. I've been in country in Waziristan and Badakhshan and Kabul. I've been in country in Congo up in the mountains. Never once shot at. You know, it's sort of when you're in those situations, you're like, okay, I know the Congolese are up on this mountainside. They're fighting some troops from Uganda or Rwanda. And that's happening over there. It's got nothing to do with where I am over here on this mountain, because they're not coming over. They don't need to come over here. If I go over there, I know I'm putting myself in danger. So I just don't go over there. Now, that being said, there's still random shit that can happen, just like there's random shit can happen in Los Angeles, man. You know, I mean, I'm much more likely to be killed in the United States than I am anywhere else I go. Because,
let's spend a minute here, because as a guy that lives in Southern California, we have the most random things happen. I have watched on the news where an entire fire truck parked on the road fell off into the crevasse when the road failed around it. Airplanes land on freeways. I mean, just because it's so big, so diverse, so packed full of people, the most impossible things happen all the time. And people die every day from just like a tree will fall across the road because the tree's been there for 100 years. And like trees just karate chop someone's car and they pass away. Unfortunately, that happens everywhere.
Yeah, that's just life, man.
Right.
It's sort of, now that all being said, when I was traveling to these places, I was a lot younger and willing to do things for the risk. It was a bit of an adrenaline rush. It was a bit of bragging rights. And I have lost that, when you want to call it nerve or what have you. But I was talking with a acquaintance of mine, Sebastian Younger, wrote an amazing book called Tribe. Spent a lot of time in country in Afghanistan as well. And him and I were talking about that. And it was sort of, his rule was always like the second, whenever you're in those situations, the second it feels like you shouldn't be there, you're done. You got to go. Yeah. Because when I was traveling around in Pakistan or Waziristan, like there was never a thought in my mind I shouldn't be there. And now I have thoughts in my mind where I'm like, I was out of my fucking mind. Like, what the hell was I doing? I mean, there is one point where we went up to Faizabad, which is in the high northeast corner of Afghanistan in Badakhshan on the way to Waziristan. And we drove from Kunduz to Badakhshan in one day, to Faizabad in one day. It was about 150 kilometers, took 14 hours. The Jeep broke down twice. We had to push it over one mountain pass. We had to change the tire 3 times. And it was there was a road, and then it was just like you were at the end of the world mountains where there was nothing else in any direction, like anywhere. Like if you're out there, you will be fucked if you don't make it. You know, you don't want to be stuck out there. But anyway, we made it up there, and it was the sort of place where, you know, they have roadblocks before you go in, guys with AKs, making sure bad elements stay out, because it's a part of Afghanistan where they have not had the war ever. Like not since 1979, they have not had war there because they've kept their place protected. They're way up in the mountains, and they make sure the people coming in and coming out are the right people. And so, I mean, the right people being I put $100 bill in my passport and they let me in. And then I got there to the tea house where guests are allowed to stay, and the chief came down and he had a leather jacket like over his shoulders, wearing it sort of like a pimp, and came down and we had a quick chat in Russian, and he was like, okay, well, you're here now, so obviously you can stay the night. First bus, you get the hell out of here, because we don't know who the fuck you are. You're a random American who just showed up here, and you look a lot like us, because I had a really big beard at the time. I was wearing a shalwar kameez. When I was living in Moscow, they always assumed I was Dari or Pashtun. I was Afghanistani. Yeah. And so I fit in there, and they get really sketched out by that when you're not then from Afghanistan.
Yep.
And so they fed me a meal, gave me a bed. Next morning, to put me on the first bus going back to Kunduz. I was sort of like, okay, I'm not going to argue with that. Like, I have nothing to prove. The amazing thing is I got there in the dark.
Wow.
And when I woke up, the view from the tea house I was staying in was just this wall of mountains of just like green forest going up to like glacial peaks of just stunning blue sky and this massive river valley. And I was just like, where am I? Like, it was almost like you were on another planet that hadn't been touched by man.
I love it. Yeah, we've had Sebastian on the show before, and I've sort of talked to him about these, this aspect of when have you had enough? I mean, I've got a lot of combat time, so I certainly have had enough. I can go back. I understand. I can go back, but no. I've it's like craps when you walk away. Like, I got chips in my pocket that belong to you. Now they belong to me. I'm just going to walk away from the table. I did all right.
I don't need to roll those dice one more time. I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And if I do, it's by choice, and it's not like a habit of let's go back to the tables and gamble all night. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, this makes sense, and I can meter out that hazard. But like you said, the stands are an interesting place, gorgeous, part of the cradle of humanity, and the blending of all of those things, Islamic culture, Russian culture. How does that happen? Far East Asian culture. Everybody's kind of run through there and set up their own little shop. And it's interesting that everywhere I go, there's always an Irish bar, which is kind of interesting. And there's always a Chinese restaurant.
Or an Australian bar. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, that's a universal truth, I think, anywhere. Like, some of the best Chinese food I've had actually was in Uganda, because there's a huge Chinese population there from the British colonialism. But yeah, I was like, for instance, Kunduz. Like, I was up in on this, tiny, not tiny, but like this little town in northern Afghanistan that you've only heard of if you were in the military, because there was a massive German military base there. But there was an Australian bar and a German restaurant, and the German restaurant sold pork shanks every night, and it would be full of a whole bunch of German soldiers looking for a little bit of that home cooking. And then they go to the Australian bar and drink Foster's.
Yes. I love it. I love it.
But that's the thing, man. Like, once you cross the Panj River, which is on the northern border of Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and to an extent Turkmenistan, they're all very, very docile and safe countries. Like, there's no war there. There's no terrorism, really. I mean, there are events, but it's really rare. And so, compared to what you have in like Peshawar in northwestern Pakistan and what you have in certain pockets around Afghanistan, I mean, to me, going to Dushanbe or Bishkek or Tashkent, it's the same as going to Yekaterinburg or, to an extent, even like Perm. I mean, it's not the same as Moscow or St. Petersburg. Those cities are completely unique entities. But a lot of these cities you'll stop at as you go on the Trans-Siberian, Omsk, Novosibirsk, they're very similar because it's all been Russified. The Sovietization sort of evened everything out in the 20th century to a point where a lot of the same feel, a lot of the same prices. And I think what people miss out on so much about Russia and the sort of CIS, the Commonwealth of Independent States with the former Soviet Union, is the diversity is insane. I mean, you're talking about a continent of people from what's basically indigenous Siberians to Mongolians to Persians to, Tajiks, which are a mix of, Persians, and, Uzbeks, which are a mix of Persians, but then Kazakhstans are mixed with Mongols, and, they're, Islamic Chinese, and there's, then the Georgians and the Caucasus, and, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have all these like, very remote, like northern indigenous groups who are still like herding reindeer up in the Arctic Circle. And then you have the white Europeans, going into Belarus and Moscow and St. Petersburg. And then you have the Black Sea, and it's just such a massively diverse place. And you get these different groups of people all over sort of adding to this mix where, they all speak Russian, sure, but they all have such vividly different cultural backgrounds that they bring to the table. And, it's sort of obvious on paper because it's so big and it stretches from Europe to the Pacific Ocean, but you don't really see that in how we think about Russian culture. We see like the white guy who's a terrorist fighting Harrison Ford, or something to that extent. We don't see the the Kyrgyz, who are more closely related to the Mongols, who have this beautiful horse culture and live in these beautiful untouched mountains, and eating this unique food that's this mix of all the great things of Asia in one spot.
Yeah.
And but when you're there, you do.
Yeah.
That's where you got to go.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to bring up too is as you look at Asia and the diverse, it's kind of crazy that when we say Asians, and this is not meant to be a political conversation, but I'm a little bit tough on folks that say the Orient is somehow a negative term, because it's really just the roots, like it is the East, is really what it means. I understand that
literally, that's literally the East.
Yeah. So, and then the Occident would be the West. Anyhow, so when we look at calling people Asian, it's really unfair to a lot of people, because, tell me that this Turkish person is somehow categorized. Like, a lot of Turkey is in Asia. Just FYI for everybody.
The majority.
Yeah. Or Georgia or Armenia, or like you said, all these other places that are no longer Europe. But that's not what we talk about when we talk about Asians, and we sort of just consider it kind of, flyover countries. But you're right. The richness of that history and culture, it's incredible.
Look, I mean, I look at it this way. Certain cultures assign certain meanings to certain words based on their history and how they choose to live with certain words. I mean, I'm guessing as well as you, and I'm sure people listening have spent a lot of time in the Far East and know that every other fucking hotel and restaurant is named Oriental something.
Right. Yes.
Because they are in the Orient in their mind. And in the, it's a sort of thing where that was the word that was brought over through Latin, through trade, through maps, because it would at least say Orient on that side and Occident on that side. And that then became the loan word that was used in that region.
Yeah.
That's not to say that people then did not turn an adjective into a noun as a derogatory word.
Right.
I mean, we spent the better part of the 20th century fighting people in East Asia and saying horrific things about them in our propaganda. That still lives on to this day in certain groups of people in the West. That's also then not being said, we can't take it in context.
Right.
When I hear someone say that, Asian people are this or that, it's like, well, hold on, man. Are you talking about an Israeli? Are you talking about an Omani? Are you talking about, a South Asian Pakistani or South Asian Indian or South Asian Bangladeshi? Are you talking about Nepalese? Are you talking about Russians? Are you talking about Siberians? Are you talking about Yakutsk? Are you, what the fuck? Asia means nothing, man. Like, it's technically Eurasia. You can make an argument that, the West white people of the Eurasian continent are still so afraid of the East that they can't even call their continent the same fucking thing.
Right.
It has to be Europe and Asia. It's like, it's not that, it's Eurasia. So everything's contextual to the point where if you hear me call someone an Oriental, it's going to be derogatory, because why would I do that? Right. I'm going to call you a Korean, or you're Japanese, or you're a Uyghur, or you're Tamil, or you're Pashtun, or you're Dari. I'll call you by what you are. It's the same thing I get because I'm indigenous American. It's like, well, should I call you a Native American, or should I call you a American Indian, or indigenous? It's like, or you can just call me Skokomish because that's where I'm fucking from.
Right.
How about you ask where I'm from, and I tell you, be like, oh, you're Skokomish, cool. Just like I ask where you're from, you're like, oh, I'm from California. You're like, oh, you're Californian, cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, to me, that difficult. But that's not the world we live in.
No, the world we live in is different, definitely different than that. Yeah, so talk a little bit more about the cultural aspect of what you're talking about, because it is crucial to like your overall performance. I mean, your ability to, there's a thing called CQ, and that's the cultural acuity you have. It's like IQ, it's like EQ, all these other things. When you show up somewhere, what are some of your cultural rules? It's one thing to say, always bring a tennis ball to massage your feet on vacation. That's great. But culturally, it's not about, like, the way I approach it is I don't worry about offense, because I want to learn. So I say, hey, I'm going to get this wrong, but help me understand how you guys do this. I'm fascinated. No one's ever going to get offended if you're fascinated about who they are. What are your cultural tricks?
Well, I think it's going on what you said, like, don't be afraid to do the wrong thing. Within reason, obviously. I mean, don't show up somewhere and be an ugly American. But it's sort of, it's a bit of I was a big reader when I was a teenager, so I'm very good at research. So I like doing a lot of research before I go to be aware of places where I can misstep or things I should be more aware of. I'm also kind of free flowing though. I like observing and watching and asking. And you know, there's like little things you maybe never think of. Like I was living in Indonesia, and when you go to tour a mosque in Indonesia, like some of the big ones in Jakarta, what have you, they want you wearing long pants and long sleeves.
Right.
Even as a man, like men or women need to be dressed appropriately. And you're a fucking 25-year-old punk hanging around in Indonesia. Of course, you're going to be wearing shorts and a shirt, probably with no sleeves on it. And they're like, okay, well, they'll give you like a robe to wear to walk around. And be like, okay, fine, cool. If that's your thing, that's your thing, and respect that. It's the same, if I'm in East Jerusalem and I want to, go pray at the Dome of the Rock, like I'm not just going to strut in there, think I deserve to go in there because it's an open place for prayer. It's like, well, no, do it right. Ask around, see when's the right time to go in, and don't go in when people are in there during their daily prayers, because that's their thing, man.
Yeah.
Like, think about where you are, think about who you are, and why you want to be there. If you don't have a good answer of why, then maybe leave it off. But it's also the same thing. Like, you don't need to do everything everywhere you go. I look at this sort of as tangentially cultural, where like when I go to Paris, I don't have to go to the Louvre. I don't have to go up the Eiffel Tower. I don't have to float on the Seine. That's all great if you're going there once in your life and you want to click those things off, knock yourself out. But I care more about food and drink, so I'm going to spend more time going to iconic cocktail bars and restaurants and going to food markets. And
right.
Like, I have one of the weird things I do when I travel is I go to grocery stores, like regular everyday grocery stores that people actually shop in. I just walk around and I see what people are buying and I see what's on sale. And, it's sort of like you get a real feel for a place by how people shop.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to get that, going out and eating at the fanciest restaurants, or you're not even going to get that at a museum, because that's what they want you to see in the museum.
Right.
And so, but if that's your thing, then that's your thing. It's fine with me. And that also being said, I go to plenty of museums as well. I went to St. Petersburg, and of course I went to the Winter Palace and the Hermitage, because it's the Winter Palace and the Hermitage, and there's more than just art there. There's history there. It's where the Bolsheviks rushed the Tsar. There's so much more there. And, so it felt like something I had to do. Plus, I studied Russian history, so it's like I felt a connection to the place. So I went there. But again, I did my research, And so I think India is a good example of a very sort of big cultural place with lots of nuances that aren't necessarily obvious. And so, you might be walking along and you might step down the wrong street, and that people just don't want you there because it's their street and they have certain rules, and you're not welcome. Or, there's plenty of times where I was walking around in India trying to get a hotel room, and it's like, no foreigners.
Yeah.
Straight up no foreigners. Or cafes, no foreigners. Straight up. And it's like, okay, fine. I mean, I find that bizarre, but it's also like, well, that's your thing, man. I'm not going to sit here and fight it and change you,
Yeah.
Because India can be a pretty aggressive place sometimes, but overall, it's you keep. I mean, this is kind of cliched, but you kind of keep an open soul and willingness to be wrong and ask questions. Usually, people are going to accommodate you and be like, "Yeah, you can't come in here, but there's another place you can go just down the road."
That's a pretty hard hedge, though. With that, usually. Give us an idea why you have to hold back on that. This is absolutely how you do it. What's the hedge for?
Because shit happens sometimes. I mean, I've been in situations where the person I'm traveling with, who's a female, like we tried to walk into a coffee shop in Calcutta, and these two guys literally picked her up and threw her out without a word. Threw her on the pavement, because it was like no women were allowed in there, much less white ones. I've been in Goa where you see young white girls in bikinis on the beach getting just hassled by locals. And it's just like, there are realities out there where you have to keep up, to use your term, a hedge of, sometimes things aren't as great as we want them to be in postcards and Instagram posts.
Yeah.
There's reality out there where, people get hurt for various reasons that are outside of any of our controls. Going back to an earlier part of the conversation, sometimes it's not randomness, sometimes it's humans being shitty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that again is everywhere. Like I said, I didn't get bothered in India, but I've been like accosted on the streets in Manchester, England by skinheads who thought I was Pakistani. And when they realized I was American, kind of got freaked out and didn't know what to do and just walked away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they were totally wanting to kick my ass because they thought I was Pakistani. And I was just like, what, you have an encounter like that, and you're just like, what the fuck just happened?
Right. No, just a beard, man. Have a nice day.
Yeah, just a beard, man. I'm American Indian from the West Coast. And they're like, huh?
Yeah.
It's like it didn't even compute in their mind. It was just like, well, you guys, because they were, this was middle of the day. They were like wasted day drunk.
Right.
And it was just like, oh man, it's like one of those situations where you're, you just got to be like, no, man, it's all good.
I'm not
going to judge. I'm just going to extricate myself from the situation and try to walk the fuck away.
Yeah. And you also have to allow for their normal to be part of your normal, even if it's uncomfortable. I mean, this is part of that cultural immersion where you get in and you're like, I like to call it miscomfort. It's not that it's uncomfortable. It's just you don't know this level of comfort. And for sure, ladies, especially in the Islamic world, you can be corrected through assault. They can put their hands on you, they can hit you, and you're welcome to say, I had a crime committed against me, but there goes your whole vacation. And by the way, you won't get what you want out of it, Yeah,
I mean, that's the same in Hindu India as well. I mean, it's rough on women there.
Yeah.
I mean, the woman I was traveling with, it was so bizarre because we crossed over the border from Amritsar to Lahore, so from Punjab, Indian Punjab to Pakistani Punjab. And it was like night and day. Like suddenly she existed again. People spoke to her. People asked her what she wanted when we sat down at a restaurant. Like, because for me, Lahore is one of my favorite cities on earth. It's one of the friendliest places I've ever been. Beautiful food. A little rough around the edges, but just a phenomenal city. And that was part of what made it phenomenal. Is like, people suddenly treated you like a human being again. This was her relaying this as a female. Whereas, going through huge parts of like very much Hindustan, not all India, I'm talking about the intense Hindu parts of India, where it was a little more just like, you're not in a caste, therefore you're outcast, which means you're at the bottom of the fucking pole. And then you go to other parts of India, like Darjeeling, where it's more Buddhist and Catholic, and they're Hindu, but they don't give a fuck about the caste system as much because they don't have time for that bullshit up there when it gets that cold. It's a lot more laid back, and it's so, and there are parts of like, I love Kochi, which is down in Kerala. But again, that's a blend of culture. The Chinese are there, the Arabs are there, the Hindus are there, the Muslims are there, the Christians are there, the atheists, everybody's there, sort of thing. And so it's a totally different vibe than you get in, say, Chennai in Tamil Nadu, which is on the East Coast. And it's a completely different, it's like trying to compare Bombay to Calcutta. I mean, those cities are so massively different that it feels like they're in different countries, speaking different languages, of course, as well. But, there's Calcutta, there's still people like pulling rickshaws, like it's 1870. And you're sort of like, wow, this is still happening in the 21st century. And it's kind of, you don't quite know how to react because you don't really think about how close so much of humanity still is to an edge that we just don't really know anymore, especially coming from the West, of just, life is rough out there, man.
Yeah. No, it's such a big point. I mean, we could spend an hour talking about that, but it's like when I see the coexist bumper sticker and I'm like, that's cute here. Yeah,
well, that's cute here.
Yeah.
But right now, Muslims are getting lynched to death for eating beef in India.
Right, yeah. And like, take any religion and you can go find them being not just persecuted, but murdered. It's
I mean, what's China's doing it right now to the Uyghurs?
Yeah,
there are 2 million and 2.5 million people in quote unquote re-education camps because simply they're Muslim.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's mind blowing, because I can't help but think, like, okay, so because I've written about this before for Uproxx about Myanmar, and they're obviously committing a genocide against the Rohingya, and they're about to send hundreds of thousands of them back to their death from Bangladesh because Bangladesh can't support them. Yet I have friends, I have colleagues, I know people who are Instagram influencers who go to Myanmar. They Instagram it and make it look beautiful with the hot air balloons and the temples and the food, and they're always just like, well, I'm not supporting the government. And it's like, yes, you are. You 100% are, because everything is government owned there.
Yeah.
Everything. Like, you are in no way not helping them buy more bullets to commit a genocide. I get that the people on the ground don't always represent the government, but when does that change? Like, when did it change in Germany, where it was just like, I'm going to go to Germany, I'm going to go to the Baltic and hang out in Danzig, and it's going to have this wonderful cultural experience in the 1930s. And when did that change to the point where it's like, oh no, I cannot go there anymore without supporting the Nazis?
Yeah.
Because there was a point, because I guarantee you, I probably would have gone there up until about 39. Because 39, Kristallnacht happened, I was like, oh, okay, this is obvious what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
But, National Geographic I have it at home, they did a cover story on Danzig in 1936, and it is an exact, beautiful, pressed up puff piece, travel piece that you would see today about a place.
Yeah.
And there are women in their traditional dress, and there's the food, but there's just swastikas that happen to be in the background.
Right.
And so it comes down to this point. It's like, well, am I not going to go to Shanghai because what's going on with the Uyghurs? Am I not going to go to Myanmar because of what's going on there? Because that's what I used to do. I used to go to Congo when shit was happening.
Right.
So like, I can't really be a double speaker here and say, well, you don't do that.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair, because I have done it.
Yeah.
I've been to Myanmar, I went there. I don't post about it because I disagree with what's happening there, and I don't want to promote it. So I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a mess out there for some of these things, man. I mean, you can make arguments against not going everywhere. I mean, I have people who are good friends who live in Germany who will not step foot in the United States because of mass shootings.
Right.
We're done. They're like, you guys fix your shit and we'll come back.
We'll come back. In the meantime, we're going to Cuba.
Right. Or fucking Italy.
Yeah.
Or Tangier. Or Turkey. Or Spain.
Yeah, completely. Well, listen, I've had you for about an hour, and I know that you're a busy guy and probably headed off to the next big place. Everybody, you can find Zach's work on Uproxx, of course, and you should read everything there because Zach does great work. But also, you can find him ZTP_Johnston or ZTP Johnston, whether you're on Twitter or Instagram. If you type in ZTP, you're going to find him. And once again, man, thanks for boosting up the Where Traveler podcast. The podcast world is crazy, and we're doing our damnedest as one of the premier brands in travel to put good content out, and I really appreciate the boost up, because people like you and Teresa are really doing incredible things, and we all need to work out more, but we got to get out more, and we'll all get along if we're able to see how other people get along, because that's just how the world works. So I appreciate your time, brother.
Oh yeah, anytime. Anything that can get people out there on the road. I mean, I understand financial complications and time and money and vacation, but you don't have to go around the world to have fun on the road. You can just take a trip to the next town over, sit at a bar, strike up a conversation, doing the same thing I do.
Yeah. Especially if you live somewhere where people vacation. I live right by Anaheim. So there are worlds all around me here in Florida and all those kind of places. You can just go there. You don't have to do the big thing. Yeah, you really can just enjoy the local thing. Well, thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well, and I look forward to next time.